You can, but just so you know. Okay, welcome to Hopeifiers. I'm Alan Friesen, or known as the Acapellist by some. I'm with Brother Scott Sweetman. Sweetman, there's the word, Scott Sweetman. Hey, Brother Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, Al?
I am good and excited about today's show. My goodness. But first, can I tell you this? My bride
Yeah,
today had a raining run where she had a personal best. She won one
fantastic.
first in one class and second in two other classes. Phew, what a woman.
Wow,
I'm
that's
sleeping with a winner
exceptional.
tonight.
Well, and we should say that Corolla's not playing around. Like she's up there in the big league. She's when it's a personal best at that level, it's a big deal. Yeah,
It's a big thing. Exactly. Yeah,
it's
very good news.
fantastic. Yeah.
I was ecstatic about it, so it was pretty cool.
Excellent. I wish I could have seen it. I miss the whole smell and if you've never seen live horse performances, you're missing something. Go down and see one because there's just a whole situational thing that goes on and you can't help but pick up the horse passion for what they're doing and
Yeah, well, you know what? Today we're having a conversation about ashwagandha. That when you harvest it, it smells like wet horse, like a sweaty horse. And
Mhm.
Corolla said, "Oh, I love that smell." And you would probably love that smell as well.
Yeah.
I don't care for it, but you two would love that smell.
Love
So,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
that,
my brother and I had a part-time job, or we created our first little business, and we cleaned a heavy horse harness in the wintertime. And
oh yes,
we converted a little granary to our workshop. And
yeah,
I don't know, it's probably like 6 feet by 4 feet. And we had all this really heavy harness in there that, of course, it soaks up all the sweat.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
so we had to heat it and then, saddle soap and everything. And the smell was just amazing. Like it was, if you like the smell of horse sweat, it was quite a treat. But if you didn't, yeah,
Yeah,
people would come visit, and then we used mink oil and things on it
yeah,
afterwards,
yeah,
which of
yeah.
course just
Softening.
added
Yeah,
another layer to it. So
yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
uh,
The only thing I didn't like the smell of on the farm was chicken coops. Not too fond of
chicken
pig
coop.
barns, but chicken coops, wow.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah. I would rather shovel like 5 barns, even the pregnant mare barn. I'd rather do that than clean a small chicken coop. But
The chicken coops. Yeah.
teach
Oh,
the
if it was a barn, pig barn. We were looking at an acreage and it had a pig barn that has been very well cleaned,
yeah,
but Alan wouldn't even go into it. Like it was so smelly. He's like, nope, not going
yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna sneak out so you guys can have your.
Okay.
Oh, shoot, I'm gonna be a few seconds.
All right. So Scott, super excited. You've done a whole bunch of research. I'm probably going to learn tons. So let's kick it off there, brother.
Yeah, I learned a lot too, and some pretty interesting stuff, pretty cutting edge stuff. This has been over the last 5 years. Let's say there's been a lot of research. You and I have talked about the field of positive psychology, and that's becoming really big. And sort of adjacent to that has been a lot of research into brain mapping using, and I had to look this up, so I'm gonna read it rather than trying to remember it. fMRI, and that's different, a little bit different than what we normally use. It's designed just for taking pictures of the brain. It's called functional magnetic resonance imaging, and it's designed to map the brain's activity, so it shows what parts of the brains what part of the brain has activity going on. And it's based on the same technology as an MRI, but it's really designed for focusing on magnetic fields, radio waves, etc., to create an image of the brain, see what's going on there. So as that technology is developed, scientists have become more and more interested in trying to figure out, is there parts of the brain that have different uh, responsibilities, or are they responsible for different things? And I know that I've benefited from that, we've talked about before. A neurologist and an endocrinologist have figured out the damage to my pituitary gland, and that's their treatment has completely changed my life. So, this is a really important field. Have you heard about it before, Al?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever had one of the MRI tests done?
No, I'm not. No.
Yeah,
You
they're
have
pretty.
obviously.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing pieces of equipment. They're massive and they hum. And yeah, you get a little claustrophobic because you're in there for quite a while, and
Yeah.
it just sort of moves you a little bit back and forth, and you hear this boom. It's you know what a tractor, the PTO, or if it's
Yeah.
running something in low gear, and that hum that
Hmm.
just sort of vibrates your soul. That's
Yeah.
kind of what, yeah, an
Yeah.
MRI feels like to me.
Yeah.
But it's not invasive at all. I mean, there's nothing that gets poked into you or anything
Yeah.
like that. So at that level, I
So
didn't mind it.
did you know they come in different Tesla ratings? Like
No,
the
I didn't.
Yeah, so there you can have higher power ones, and the higher power ones are often more for the research type things as instead of the 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 medical care type ones, right? Apparently, is the way I understand it. So, but apparently the ones that have the high Tesla ratings that you could use for the research that are that powerful for that, then you just use less. Don't pin them. Don't put them all the way to the floor when you have a human.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. And I do know they come in different sizes. When I was in Japan, I was too big for the MRI
Yeah,
machines
yeah,
they were using there. Just
yeah.
physically too big for the tables. So yeah, they come a long way. But this research has allowed a lot of interesting things to come out of it. And I came across one study where they were looking at static traits. And I had to look that up. I'd never heard of a static trait before. Have you come across that in your
Nope.
reading? Yeah. So psychologists, developmental scientists, people in that field, and it's controversial a little bit. There's people who disagree and have done scientific research that suggests that it may not be this way, but it's sort of accepted, largely accepted. I'll say that people have static traits that do change over time. So there's been a lot of research at what ages certain traits are characteristic of certain people. So these static traits, it's believed, are what make up our personalities. So, and on the acapellas.ca, I'm going to link some research on this if you're interested in looking into it. You can actually take some tests to see some of the personality or static traits that you have. There's also some very interesting charts. A study was done in 2017 on a group of middle school students, and then 40 years later, the same students were interviewed and tested again, and it was found that some of the traits changed and some of them didn't, but there was a lot of continuity among the group in terms of the changes, right?
Okay,
So
so if I'm combining what you're swathing, then you are saying that you come with a set point of this is your set of level of happiness. This is your set level of curiosity. This is your that kind of a thing that you have. You come kind of with a level kind of that's part of your unique combination of skills, abilities, talents is these set levels that you have. And you might have a 80 on something and I got a 45, but on something else I got a 92 and you got a 61 or whatever, right? So
exactly,
got it. Okay,
yeah.
cool. All right.
And
I
they
have not
and
heard.
yeah, it's really interesting stuff. I have a lot of good links and a lot of research on. We could do a couple of shows just on this uh, research alone, but hope is considered to be one of these static traits, and it touches on two things, and it's, as we said, something that's become important in positive psychology, but also in brain research in general. And hope combines two things, and we've talked about this before. Remember, we talked about how hope is different than wishes because hope is usually has a goal expectation, like there's some expectation that this is a real possibility. And then there's also agency. And agency is a kind of a fancy word to describe the pathway or the method. There's a desire to achieve the goals, and there's effort expended to find those ways. So when we hope for something, usually we don't just sit there and do nothing. There's usually a goal, and we usually think about how we can obtain that goal or how we can get those things. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah, it does make sense. You know what you twigged on for me? I was having this lovely little session with Dr. Amy Appian, and I'm a little off topic maybe, but she was talking about regulation. Regulation, somebody who's in a unregulated state kind of a thing, is
Mhm.
like stabilization is for a medical procedure, right? If somebody went in to have a surgery, we have to do these things before this happens, right? And
Right.
so basically her thing is about if somebody is in an emotional upset type situation, it has to be where you start with the regulation. You have to regulate yourself and you have to help to regulate them. And once you get to that calm aliveness, then you can kind of move forward. But the part when you were talking about agency, this is what twigged for me. She said there's basically we all need to get regulation, to get to our optimal place. We all need a felt sense of safety, a felt sense of support, and at that point then we can get into a regulated state where we can say, okay, like I can make this work, right? And I think that's what you're saying. That's hope, right? That's basically when you have one, the desire to have it, make it better, and then two, you also have either the supports or the resources that there's a reasonable expectation you can pull this off. It's not a wish, it's something that you're actively going to pursue and engage.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. And I think you hit it on your last sentence, is that there may not be a clear 1, 2, 3, but
Yes.
you believe that there is, and you're out looking for it, right? So you're actively saying, I can meet this goal. I just have to find the way to make this happen. And
Yeah.
that's what defines hope, at least in terms of positive psychology. So taking this
Scott,
for granted.
go ahead. So I was just going to say, you're getting to
No,
this, right? Well, about the set point for hope. Like, do we all have a different level of set point for hope is what you're going to tell us as well, correct?
well, it does change by gender and it changes by age.
Okay.
So I think in this show, what we're going to talk about more is how hope is identified in our brain structure, and then what its purpose is, and how that can be applied in sort of our everyday life. And then on acapellas.ca, we're going to put up resources, including some self-assessment guides that people can use to
Perfect.
assess their own hope level. There's a name for it, and I have to. I'll remember it before the. It's called the Dispositional Hope Scale (DHS),
Oh,
and it's sort of the standard test for determining one's hopefulness.
oh,
Who
interesting.
knew, right?
Who
I
knew?
didn't know until I started to research on this. So, and I have a PDF version of that test, and it's not a big test. I think it's like I'll just look at it quick. There's maybe 12 questions, and then you weight those 12 questions on definitely true, mostly true, somewhat true, slightly true, etc., 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 which assigns a certain point number to it. And then you come back, and it's sort of divided into agency and willpower, pathways and willpower, and sort of where you score. And all of those things taken together gives you an idea of your hope score as an adult. There's a different test for children, which is way more complicated.
Hmm.
And I looked at it, and I can include a link to it, but I don't think it's something that a layman can tackle very easily. It's pretty complicated making those sorts of assessments of children. But
Mm-hmm.
certainly the DHS is something that you could take yourself and score yourself out of interest, and I'll put that on your
Excellent.
website. So,
Oh, by the way, to
okay,
anyone confused, if you're having a conversation and we trigger something about trauma or a discussion that way, and you feel you need some support and resources right away, 211, give 211 a call. There's folks that are standing by you who are trained professionals to assist you if we trigger anything for you.
of course, and we're talking about a lot of things that are very deep for a lot of people, us too, right? I mean, we've been there, we've done that, we've experienced trauma, we've been triggered. So don't feel alone, and just make the call if you need some help. Now, the scientists looked at something called and this is your set point. They looked at the fractional amplitude of low frequency fluctuation. Okay. And that sounds like a whole bunch of scientific gobbledygook to me. And there are definitions and explanations of that if you're a science kind of person and want to figure out what that is. Basically, the way I understood it is it's a kind of juice, a kind of power or some measurable fluctuation inside the brain that they can use the fMRI to disseminate.
Okay.
Okay. They found that the presence of hope trait was related to lower FALFF, or the low frequency fluctuations, values in the and I'm reading it because I don't want to mess it up, bilateral medial orbital frontal cortex, or the MOFC area of the brain. Okay, for those of us, good, yeah, yawn. That's what I thought too. For the rest of us, though, it's actually just above our eye orbits and in the center, and then it goes about 3 centimeters back. And I have links that show the pictures and actually shows the MRIs that they were doing of this.
That looks like where they always talk about the third eye is what where you're kind of referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where apparently the bilateral medial orbital frontal cortex is.
All right.
And that region of the brain was active when the hope trait was present. And so what they did is they took a bunch of students, again, I believe in this case, I could be wrong on that, but it was a decently large study. And they looked at people who scored high on the hope trait, and then people who scored low on the hope trait. And the people who scored high had a lot of activity in this area, and the people who didn't had very low activity in this area. Okay. So this area of the brain is involved in reward-related processes, right? It produces motivation, problem solving, goal-oriented behavior, according to the scientists. So the other things that affect this area are, motivation, problem solving, goal-oriented behavior. And we've talked about how important it is to understand that hope involves a goal. And it's not a wish, oh, I wish I was a foot taller and played in the NBA. That's just not something that hope is related to, right? But if we understand what hope is, and this is where I got really excited, the better we understand what hope is, the more we can use it as a tool to make our lives better, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You agree on that one? I got you
Sure.
Just as you were drinking. Sorry about that, buddy.
No, that's okay.
So
I like it. Are you suggesting then whatever this set point is and it changes, but we have some influence on it as well? Is that where you're gonna get to? I've got to believe.
Yeah.
Right?
So the studies that are going on right now, and there's like I said, this is the first study I think was done in 2015, so 7 years ago. And in terms of scientific studies, that's not that long ago, right? A lot of these studies are coming out of Asia, China, Hong Kong, and other areas, where North America is a little bit behind the curve on positive psychology, perhaps. And I'm not sure why geographically most of the science research that I could find was coming out of those areas. But from 2015 to 2017, that was the case. And then as we get closer to now, we see a shift to be more global in the research and attention it's getting. So the scientists, this was like the first time that there was a strong scientific study that supported that hope may have a physical presence in the brain. And this is really important because people with hope tend to do better. There was a study on academics done in, let me just bring it up here, University of Kansas, by Dr. Snyder, Shorey, Clevens, Pulvers, and Adams, and Wilkland, University of Kansas. And so they looked at college students and what trait best projected the success or the failure of college students, right? That's pretty important.
Sure.
And they assumed that intelligence was going to be the biggest factor in success or failure. Would you agree with that one?
That would
That
make sense.
was
That would be
that was
a
my
reasonable.
first guess, right?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
And that the most intelligent people would have the most success in the classroom. But what they came out with actually was that hope, in fact, greatly indicates whether somebody's going to be successful or not successful. And the people with strong hope traits are more successful, according to this study. And they were quite surprised by this because often things like hope or optimism are considered nice, but not really a trait for success, right? Like
Hmm.
in
So
business, we think that we need. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, so hope ranked above intelligence is what you're saying then as a success thing for college students.
It did,
Wow.
yep. And it's not too long. It's 7 pages long. I'll post it up there. It's an interesting study. There's some gray area. I'm not going to say that I fell off my chair after reading it. Like obviously, intelligence is important and those things, but people with a high hope trait score were very good at setting goals and finding ways to achieve them.
Hmm.
And the problem with just raw intelligence is that doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at setting a goal and finding a way to achieve that goal. And
Right.
we all think of sort of the mad scientist, or those people that have this great intelligence, but they sort of toil away in this dark, dusty room, and no one can understand them. So ultimately, and that's supported by a bunch of other studies, and wasn't alone in their findings. So I would say that it's pretty legitimate. Um, 2011 study from Malaysian and Hong Kong universities. 2002, as I said, from University of Kansas, and there we can see that the world is sort of coming together more in those studies. And what they're finding ultimately is that what this does is protect our brain from anxiety.
Oh,
And yes, this particular function in the brain counteracts the activities that our brain uses to create anxiety. And this was their belief and their finding, and they say a lot more research needs to be done. But from the study that they did and other studies related to this, it looks like the hope center of our brain is one of the genetic features that our brain has developed to counteract the anxiety we feel in everyday life, and living in a world that's threatening, and all of those things, which I found pretty interesting because until this study, I don't think that even I felt that hope was perhaps a biological process built into us for survival or longer, better life. I felt that it was more of a psychological process. How did you perceive that, Al? Where do you
yeah.
think hope was?
Yeah, I know. I think in a similar perspective to you, Scott. I think that I was kind of viewing it the same, right? So yeah, cool. I did want to also just thank you. About 6 months ago, you told me about Ted Lasso, that I would enjoy that. I started watching it 2 days ago, and I
Yeah.
do thoroughly enjoy it. I just love it. Oh, it's an amazing series. Oh,
And
yeah.
that's a great connection because that's his superpower, right?
It
He's
is.
just
Nobody has
hopeful,
more hope
always.
than Ted Lasso, right? And
Yeah.
whatever the problem is, he's going to get to a solution somehow, some way. And he doesn't He doesn't care if people call him wanker and tell him he's an idiot. None of that matters to him. He's going to get it done, and he just smiles and nods his head and carries on. So yeah. Amazing.
Well, and this research, and why I thought it was important for us to discuss it, is it shows that hope isn't a wishy-washy kind of
Right.
feeling that you can either have or don't have, that it plays an important part in both our physiological and psychological health and wellness.
Right.
And
And I love how you like the one thing about it being, you know, the factor for determining success in higher education. That's amazing, right? That's counterintuitive, but now you think about it, there's sense to that. But I want to know, Scott Sweetman, brother Scott, how do we up level our hope? How do we engage how do we kindle the fire of hope? What do we do, brother?
that's it's simple,
Okay,
actually.
let's hear
It
it.
is. Stop complaining.
Stop complaining.
And stop complaining. And there's a lot of research and anecdotal information that complaining activates the anxiety centers of our brain. And
Mm.
so when we complain about things, even if it's a sort of casual kind of complaining, oh, the weather's been really crappy lately, that has,
Scott, hold on.
sorry.
Here it comes. Ready? Complain you should not.
Well done, Yoda. It's true. And there's a lot of evidence, there's medication, there's meditation, there's all kinds of very complex and sometimes difficult systems that are supposed to help you develop these things. But all of the research I did on this, one thing that was sort of reoccurring is to stop complaining, is to stop being negative. And of course, your inner voice is important, but if your outer voice is being negative, your inner voice is going to follow.
Yeah.
And, I read some really interesting pieces on how negativity is part of our survival. And there was a great talk that I listened to, and I'll see if I can pull up the link, about how in a caveman world, negativity keeps you alive. So we're
Sure.
hardwired for negativity, right? You know, when you come out of your cave, and I'm stealing this from the talk, when you came out of your cave, you weren't like, oh, what a great day, I'm going to go for a walk and see what's going on. No, you kind of like, tentatively came out of your cave and said, okay, what's going to try and kill me now? What's out here that is going to try and eat me or run over me or burn me or crush me? And that's what kept us alive in that primitive environment. And some would say still today,
Scott,
that sense that
what would burn you? Are you thinking dragons? That's what you're thinking about. But when you're saying, well, what would burn you? The threat? It would be dragons. Well, I guess it could be
that
wildfire.
your mind is brilliant, Al. I was actually thinking of exposure, and
Oh yes, sun.
the yeah, the sun and those. But dragons works for me, Al. It really does, buddy. I'm down with dragons. I like that better than I was thinking. But
Okay, all right. Just follow. See if I follow along here.
I was trying to work in there that even the environment, like we had to learn how to deal with the environment. I think of the river that runs by our farm up by Bentley is called the Blind Man River. And the story that goes with that is about some explorers that some of them went blind in the party, and the rest of them are going blind, and they were there in the winter time until an aboriginal fellow helped them and taught them how to make sunglasses,
Mm,
the slitted
yeah,
birch bark, because they were going blind from overexposure, the white snow and the bright,
right.
everything
Yeah,
around them. And so that's why it was called the Blind Man River. Apparently, I have no idea if that was true or not. But I was thinking that we have to learn those things, right? Like the environment, heat, temperature, humidity, all of those things uh, are dangerous to humans. We're pretty weak environmentally, or in terms of our ability to protect ourselves. We don't have fangs, we don't have claws, we don't have thick hide, and those types of things.
I don't think I would pick a fight with a cheetah or anything. I don't think that'd be a good match. I don't think I'd win
No,
that. You know.
no. I saw a baboon once in real life when I was in Japan, and it was a big male baboon, and it howled and it pulled back its lips, and I've spent time around Rottweilers and Shepherds and Akita, and they've got scary teeth, and they're, like this big. But this
Mhm.
baboon, he had fangs. They were massive. Like,
Wow.
I was blown away. I'm like, no way. That, like, I would not want to get bit by that thing. And they're pretty fast, and they're a big pack. And yeah, I can imagine that negativity and being scared kept us alive a lot. And
Yes.
I think that, and so I think that when we look at that, it's like body type, right? A lot of us, myself included, are fighting with the fact that 10,000 years ago we would have done great because our bodies store everything as fat, and that at one time was a survival skill.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
now it's a danger. Obesity is out of control in most developed countries,
Right.
and
In leaner times, having extra body weight would get you through lean times, right? Like, that you could survive that, or survive not having to, that you were ill for a bit of time and you weren't consuming any food for a bit, that your stores would sustain you. But we don't have that problem anymore. So no.
no, but we still have that genetic disposition, in the same way that these studies are saying that we're hardwired for anxiety, and we're hardwired for negativity, because it's protected us for millennia. How our bodies are magnificent things, and they tend to have balances and controls built into them. And this research is saying that the part of the brain that's responsible for hope is a balancing effect, a protecting effect from too much negativity or too much anxiety. And if we can understand how that's a scientific function of our brains, then we can look at ways to encourage the development and the growth and the use of that part of our brains. And one of the things, as you asked me, that came up was stop being negative. It's the old fable about the white dog and the black dog, and which is going to grow bigger. Well, it just depends on which one you feed. And that's the same way. All of the scientific research and all of the stuff that I've read, really complicated, really interesting, really amazing. But I think the bottom line is we have these two balancing factors in our physiology and our base DNA, and one of them is negative, and it's to protect us. Neither of them are bad, right? The negativity has kept us alive as a species, but as you said about the food and the eating, we don't really need to have that today. We don't need to be anxious 24/7, because it also damages us. And uh, I don't think in the past that we've really looked at what internal mechanisms we know. And I know you research the vagus nerve a lot,
Yeah.
and its role in helping protect us from those the over effects of anxiety and those types of things. So, yeah, if you one of the easiest ways to help build up your hope and your positivity is to try and stop complaining and about everything. If you can't say something positive, don't say anything.
Okay. So to
Uh,
stop complaining, Scott, to stop complaining mean find gratitude, find, are the two related, or just stop complaining is one level and being grateful is higher than that? Is that how it is in your mind, or is the two of them coincident?
my aunt and uncle made a decision 20 years ago to stop being negative. And they just said, negativity brings us down, it brings the people we care about down, and we're just going to drive it out of our lives. When, we catch ourselves saying something negative, we're going to stop, and we're going to try and find something that we're grateful for, as you said, or try and find something positive. And if we really can't, then we're not going to say anything. We're going to look for another way to view the situation. So I think it's a combination of both. And in their case, I can honestly say that their personalities changed, and over that time, and I wasn't with them the whole time, I was overseas and doing my own thing, but certainly that decision made them two of the most incredible people I know. And
Yeah.
today, you can spend days with them and they never say even small negative things like, oh boy, I'm really tired of this weather. Just, it's a habit now, and they don't say those things.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
they have such a positive outlook. They've both been struggling with cancer, and they've been very successful in that fight. I just want to add that reminded me of something. A number of these studies were done with cancer patients,
Mm.
and can you guess what the reasoning was behind that?
Well, I would assume the degree of hope they had kind of determined their results and how long they would survive, or that maybe they would have a remission and then be cured, kind of a thing. Or I would assume the higher the hope, the better the results, the better the outcomes. Is that a fair?
It is, and you're exactly right. But it was discovered the other way around. They were looking at why some people diagnosed with cancer thrived and actually did quite well. Their quality of life improved, and their overall sense of joy and completeness grew. And how some people became completely devastated and basically gave up on their lives, and they didn't survive very long. And so scientists went looking for what difference there was between these people. And again, as you said, one of the strong things that came out in their research was people that did better were optimistic and were hopeful. And you remember, like we said, that hope is goals and agency. And so people that have been given, a terminal diagnosis of cancer, and again, if you're triggered by this conversation, Al, the number is
211.
211, right? Because I know I've had people in my family pass away from cancer, and it can be upsetting to people. But the people that set goals, and they
And we're
didn't
not,
have to be
we are
about.
not saying, I think we're going to interject right now that we're not saying if you have cancer that you thought it into your body or anything like that. Like
No, 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 no,
that's not what
no.
we're saying. If you're currently having a struggle with cancer, that is not the impression we want you to have. So not true.
Absolutely not. The research that I was looking at, and again, I'll post it and people can look at it for themselves, was saying that people who set goals, and not necessarily goals about I'm going to live another 10 years, but I want to, get the shed painted that I always said I was going to paint. I want to take the missus to the coffee shop where we met. Just set goals and then said, okay, how am I going to do that? And if they were on special treatment, how are they going to work around that treatment? Were they going to choose not to take that treatment? But that process of setting goals and developing an agency to make that happen improved their quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And those things we're calling hope have a very powerful effect on all people. And science is really starting to look at the mechanisms in our brain and our bodies that are responsible for that hope trait. And it's connected to optimism and lots of other things. But I'm really excited to see that it's no longer being considered a fanciful feeling, that it's being considered more an actual mechanism of fulfillment, a mechanism of health,
Right.
and a way for us to enjoy better lives.
Right. So basically, we're saying that if hope is a good, that if you cultivate it, if you make it grow, you kindle that flame, then what are you going to get? You're going to get better results in your life, better enjoyment of your life, be able to move through your life with more ease and more joy and more health. Right. That's kind of what the advantage of hope brings to us. Right. So yeah, that's beautiful, Scott.
Well, and a personal story about you and I. And when I first met you, sometimes you would drive me crazy because there would be something wrong that we were trying to deal with, you and I as a team. And I'd be really upset about it. And I'd be like, and you were like, well, yeah, well, okay. And I would like, I know this is important to you, but you're not swearing, you're not cursing, you're not. like, and it would be like, why? And certainly I've seen you grow in that area, but I realize now that one of the things that you avoid doing in a conflict as much as you can is avoid being negative about it. And that can be frustrating because, when there's something wrong, we all kind of like to wallow in that confrontation, right?
Not only that, you might have perceived me as, oh, he doesn't care. Like, this isn't important to him. Look, he's not engaged
Yeah,
with it.
in my case, I knew you cared, right? Because I knew it was things that we were working on together. But I couldn't understand why, you weren't out there kicking the dirt and cussing and swearing and, venting that passion. And I really believe it's because at some point in your life, you made a decision that didn't help the situation in any way, that the energy you spent on that, even though it might feel good in the moment, later you regret it. Right. And I, I, I got mad at somebody.
I do have to,
Sorry?
do have to share that I have found a kind of a more, yes, I don't try and be anything negative. There are times when I get frustrated with things like that's, so now
Absolutely, yeah.
my favorite thing, if I'm pulling wrenches and things aren't working good, and another thing broke when I trying to fix this one and then that broke, I go over to where there's some bags of the shavings and do a few of them into the shavings, a little yell, okay, I'm good, go back, get all my thing, just like express it, get away, get back, and you're all good, right? So I think part of that is sort of important as well, but everybody's different in terms of what they need to make themselves whole and functional and working at their optimum, right? We're all unique individuals, and getting what you need is important. So
Well, and on the hope scale, and what you were talking about, that set point, is that's one of the areas that age helps with. The older we get, the more ability we have to be positive in general, or inversely, not to become as negative over things. When we're younger, we tend to become like, our emotions are, I don't want to say stronger, but more from our base level, they're both higher and much lower, right? Which often doesn't help the situation. But as we get older, the one article is really mapping that out, because over 40 years they did this study on quite a large number of people from middle school until their 40s. And they were looking at exactly those things. What changed, right? They used this test and self-diagnosis, self-evaluation, pardon me, from the people involved. And they found that the older people were, the better they were at avoiding negativity, and they had more hope, which we tend to think of as kind of counterintuitive, right? Because you would think the older you get, the closer you get to death and the end of your life, that you might feel more hopeless. You can get less done. There's less chance that you're going to be rich, famous, and good looking. All I say that tongue in cheek, but there's lots of very senior people that are rich and talented and good looking. But you know what I'm saying, right, Al?
yeah.
Is that there's this, nature's on our side, I think, is what I'm trying to say, and that's what I took away from all of this, and I guess that would be the message I would try and share with people, is that hope is real. Scientists can tell you where in your brain it comes from. It's not, an airy fairy imagined kind of feeling. It's not something that you have to pretend to have. Hope is real, and it's in us as a mechanism for dealing with the things that scare us in life, the things that threaten us, the things that, the boogeyman that goes bump in the night, in very literal and very metaphorical ways. And I think that, as you brought up, Alan, this is the key point of the Hopeifiers, is what can you do to make your life better? What can you do to make yourself better? The lighting you've got there right now is really perfect. I love that. It looks great. This is really soft and warm. But my point is that by being less negative, by realizing that hope is a natural defense against the things that make us negative, the things that stress us out, the things that make us sick, we can encourage growth in that. And it's as simple to start with, certainly, as being less negative, saying less negative things, being less negative in your life. And that becomes a habit, and habits become a trait, and it becomes part of your personality to be positive instead of negative. And every report I said, positive people live longer, succeed more. You name it, if you're positive and hopeful, you will live a better life.
Scott,
And
that is beautiful. So what we're saying, hope is a superpower. We all got some. We can get more. All we got to do is stop the complaining, get more gratitude in play, and that's going to work. Your hope's going to go up. Life's going to get better.
yeah, and I think your point about getting gratitude is the step two to the process. And I think it's really,
Yes,
I think stopping being negative is pretty easy. Remind yourself, ask your partner, your spouse, a friend, hey, if I'm being negative, remind me, my commitment to try and be more positive. Because we get ranting. I think
sure.
the internet's bad for that, right? Because I
Oh,
see
yeah.
people that in person are quite positive, but then I see these rants they've gone on the internet where
Yeah.
nobody's in front of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I think that's a fairly straightforward step, being more positive. But I think gratitude is, and I think we should do a show on that. And I'd like to hear from you, and maybe you can give us a little hint. How do you express gratitude? Like, how did you find more gratitude in your life?
Well, I think I have I'm trying to get to a very base level of gratitude. And the base level I'm speaking to or speaking about is that I have, as you do, a rhythm in my chest. And we all do. And we all have this miracle breath that enters our body, filling us with light and love and life, right? These are the things that we all share. And we all share that because we're all connected, we're all one, right? So at the base level, I'm grateful for this rhythm and this breath. And then after that, I'm grateful for the other opportunities I get to engage with my brothers and sisters in the community. There's some amazing, amazing people out there. And you'll find the ones, if you want to have more hope, you'll find the ones that are going to buoy you up, that are going to give you hope, that are going to, you say, oh, I like being around him or her because, boy, I feel good when I'm around them. I feel more energy. I feel calmer, that kind of thing. So humans are wonderful to be around, and I think that's how we get hope, and that's how we have gratitude for those in our lives. And speaking of that, Brother Scott Sweetman, I'm very grateful for you. You're an amazing friend, and I thank you very much.
I thank you, Al. I really enjoy our friendship, and lots of great things have come out of it. We've shared a lot of wonderful moments with people, and it's been. I just look forward to spreading hope as far and as wide as we can together.
We will
Speaking of
we
that,
will hopefully
next,
be the Hopeifiers. We'll hopefully be the hope carriers, the Hopeifiers for many decades to come, Scott.
yeah, we wanna die with hope in our hearts. That's for sure. Whenever that may be, I hope
Exactly.
that's the last thing on my lips is something hopeful.
Nice.
Um, and next week we're going to be back on Thursday,
Yes.
and we're going to have more for people. So again, anyone who wants to look into the research I've mentioned, we're going to be posting it on the Acapellist homepage. The Acapellist, as you can see, oh, you don't have it up in the text here, but it's theacapellist.ca. And I'll provide links to the information that I've talked about. Read it over. Maybe you'll come up with a different viewpoint on it. Maybe you'll have a different perspective. Make sure you share that with us. We're happy to hear if you agree with us, if you disagree with us. We like to know what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And we really hope that each one of you out there can experience hope and happiness. And we open our hearts to you. And we hope that you'll do the same. Come and visit us next Thursday. Visit the Acapellist, my brother and friend, Alan Friesen, and myself, Scott Sweetman. See us next week.
Keep well.